Okay everybody, this video is going to be a quick review of the Atlas activities from Imperial to Feudal Japan. I'm going to jump right in here. The first section is just true and false based on these facts. I'll read you the facts and I'll go over all the questions. It says, unlike mainland Asian civilizations, Japan was rarely threatened by invaders. However, it was influenced by neighboring cultures. Japan's religion, written language, and government were based on ideas from China and Korea. Strong emperors ruled Japan. Over time, civil wars divided Japan into tiny kingdoms with their own rulers. As internal conflict decreased, a more unified Japan increased trade with neighboring regions. Alright, let's see if we can figure out what's true and false. One says Japan was frequently invaded. Correct answer is false. One of the benefits of being an island nation is that you have protection from invaders. That was one of the things that kept Japan safe. 2. Japan was influenced by China and Korea. Well, that's true. It mentioned that ideas about language, government, and religion came from China and Korea. And 3. Trade increased when Japan became more stable. That's also true. The next section asks us to look at this map. It's about the ruling families of Japan. The caption says, conflicts between land-owning families weakened the emperor's political power. By 1192, shoguns, which means generals, took over as the true rulers of Japan. So it shows us between 552 and 1300, and it color coordinates the main land-owning families beginning in 1183. The Fujiwara, the Minamoto, and the Taira. It also shows you the emperor's capital and the shogun's capital. The map itself tells us things that were coming from Korea and influencing Japan, things coming from China and influencing Japan, and it gives us 4 little facts here. 1. In the year 858, the Fujiwara family gains control over the emperor. 2. 1159, the capital was burned by warring families and rebuilt in 1192 as Kyoto. 3. 1185, Minamoto destroys Taira, soon become the first shoguns, that means military commanders. And 4. In 1192, the shogun's capital has more power than the emperor's. Okay. Question 1. How did Korea influence Japan? Well, if we look at the arrow, it says that the introduction of Buddhism in the year 552 came from Korea in that year, so that's the influence it has in Japan. They introduced Buddhism to the country. 2. How did China influence Japan? Well, look at all the things on the arrow here. We have Chinese writing, art, and government. Those are all things coming from China, going to Japan, beginning in the year 600. So you can say any of those. Writing, art, and government spread to Japan. 3 says, who were the 3 major land-owning families in Japan? Well, you have to look at the key, and each color represents a different family. Purple is the Fujiwara. The light orange is Minamoto, dark orange is Taira. So you're going to have those 3 names, Fujiwara, Taira, and Minamoto. And then which family became the first shoguns? If you read fact number 3, it's the Minamoto. They became the first shoguns. Okay, the section about people and cultures, you have to look at this little diagram here, which shows us the social structure in Japan. This should look familiar to you. It's somewhat similar to the feudal societies that existed in Europe during the Middle Ages. It says, after years of civil war, a new social structure emerged in Japan. Local military leaders called daimyo challenged the power of the shoguns with armies of paid samurai. So in Japan, at the top of society was the emperor, at the bottom were peasants. But they're going to point out that this person called the shogun really has more power than the emperor, really has more control. The emperor, they say, is ruler in name only. Okay, question 1 says, which one is the largest and poorest group? Well, if you look at the bottom of society, just like many of the societies we've learned about, are the peasants. They were the largest and poorest group. 2. Warriors that are serving the shogun and the daimyo. Well, what are the warriors called? They're called samurai. You may have seen them. We're going to see a picture in the next section about these Japanese samurai, the very famous warriors. They're the ones that serve the shogun and the daimyo. So number 2 should be samurai, choice F. 3. The national military leader. Well, the person who's in charge of the military is the man called the shogun. That's the national military leader. So that's choice E. 4. What was the name for local warlords? That's what the daimyo were, local warlords. So 4 is choice D. And 5, the ruler in name only. Like I told you at the start, the emperor was the person who was supposed to be in charge, but really didn't have the authority. The shogun during this time was really the person with the power. So the ruler in name only is B, the emperor. 6, somebody who has low status, but some were wealthy. If you look above, peasants are merchants and artisans. It's interesting, it says they have low status even though some were wealthy. In Japanese and Chinese societies at the time, merchants, people that made a living trading things, were not as respected as other people, including farmers, because the belief was that they didn't do anything for their money. They didn't actually do the work to earn their living. So they didn't have as much respect within those societies. So 6, low status, somewhat wealthy, that's choice C, merchants and artisans. Okay, next section is about places, regions, and landscapes. You're going to have to use the little top cities in the year 900 graphic to find information for most of the questions. The caption says Kyoto was the imperial or the emperor's capital. Strong imperial power made Kyoto one of the world's great cities. So at the time, the emperor was in Kyoto, whereas the shogun's capital was in this place called Kamakura. So question 1 in 900, which top 10 city was located in Japan? So you have to look at this chart here. In the year 900, actually the biggest city, the city with the largest population, was Baghdad, Iraq in that year. But the only city in Japan in the top 10 was Kyoto. So number 1 is Kyoto. 2, what was the population of the city in that year? Well, straight from the same chart, you have 200,000. So 2 is 200,000. 3 says, what was the city called before it was rebuilt? Now you have to go back over to the map here, and you can see Kyoto before it was rebuilt was called Heian. 4, when was this city rebuilt? We'll look on the map again, and you can see it was burned in 1159 and rebuilt in 1192. And then it says, whose capital was this city? I understand a lot of people mistakenly wrote Japan, but it says in the little caption here that this is the emperor's capital. There were 2 separate capitals, one for the shogun, one for the emperor, so you can say it was the emperor's capital or the imperial capital. Alright, on gathering the facts, here's where we can see what the Japanese samurai looked like. There is a little kind of blurb here and a caption. I'll read you what these say. If they fought with swords, why were they called shoguns? Good question. Well, it's because it's a Japanese term. It's got nothing to do with guns. Shogun means great general in Japanese. The first shogun, Yoritomo, received his title from the emperor in 1192, and Yoritomo established a military government called a shogunate. Over here, it talks about the samurai. It says they followed a strict honor code called Bushido, or way of the warrior. They valued honesty, courage, and fighting skills. Okay, question 1, what was Bushido? Well, what I just read here, this way of life, kind of like medieval knights followed that code of chivalry, where they were supposed to be honest and brave and defenders of women. Japanese samurai followed this code called Bushido, which said they were to follow the way of the warrior. One of the things that they became famous for was if they felt they had dishonored themselves or their family, they might take their own lives, commit something called seppuku, that they would rather kill themselves essentially than be dishonored. That was something that samurai were famous for. 2, what type of weapon was used by the samurai? Well, you can see here, he's holding it in the picture, and it also mentions they don't use guns, even though they were called shoguns, the leaders. They use swords. And 3, what virtues and skill were valued by the samurai? Right from the caption, it says they value honesty, courage, and fighting skills. Okay, the last section, that's about location. That one's not working for me.